Hola, Namaste. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends who are here and watching us from all around the globe. Firstly, please accept my heartfelt congratulations for hosting the fifth edition of the international event for appealing menstrual dignity from Global South. Demanding menstrual dignity in colonized cultures and discourses on menstrual movement as well as overall human rights is not an easy task. Secondly, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude for inviting me as a special delegate on behalf of Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. It is my honor and I am truly humbled to be here with you all. Let me start my speech by taking you back 43 years to my childhood in Nepal, a country in the Global South that is 15,255 kilometers away from you. When I was about 7 years old, I learned that menstrual blood is dirty and a curse from God. Meanwhile, I witnessed my mother following various forms of menstrual restrictions. Amongst other things, she was not allowed to mingle with the male members of the family, not allowed to participate in any social and religious activities, not allowed to enter the kitchen, and so on. I also saw men yelling at women without any reason. I was traumatized. I felt suffocated, perpetually grasping for air. I did not like being a girl, so I attempted suicide when I was about 9 years old. Unfortunately, not for me, I felt I really wanted to die. I was begging, crying, and pleading with God to convert me into a boy instead of a girl. I felt equally helpless and hopeless. 5 years later of my failed suicidal attempt, or 38 years ago, I had a first menstruation at a time when I was returning from school. I was scared to think that my family would force me to follow the restriction that my three sisters and mother had followed. So I ran away from home for 5 days to avoid following the menstrual restrictions. Later, while doing my bachelor's degree, I discovered that there existed a range of menstrual practices, whether in educated, urban societies, and even in the capital city, Kathmandu. At this moment, I was aware that discriminatory menstrual practices have been observed worldwide with various names, forms, and magnitudes, regardless of class, education, region, religion, and so forth. There are places where it's readily apparent and others where it's not. It has been reported worldwide that there are over 5,000 euphemisms or fake names for menstruation. By considering all forms of menstrual practices, Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation defines menstrual discrimination as a group of practices that includes taboos, stigmas, silence, abuses, restrictions, violation, and deprivation from resources and services associated with menstruation throughout the life cycle of menstruators. Regrettably, the UN and its key partners are misinterpreting menstrual discrimination and misleading the public. Menstrual discrimination is considered by the UN to be a harmful traditional practice. Dear friends, do you agree that menstrual discrimination is a form of harmful practice? I do not, for three reasons. One, on earth, more than half of the population is born with the uterus and ovaries, and menstruation is necessary for human to survive. How can this be a practice for communities and societies? Second, it is a natural. Nature has been the source of it for more than 3 million years, not like it was created or practiced for a long time as a tradition. 3. Menstruation is for all menstruators who are born with uterus and ovaries like girls, women, trans men, queer, and it also a matter of non-menstruators. It is a crystal clear to me that menstrual discrimination should not discuss under harmful traditional practice. Here I again urge the UN to discuss menstrual discrimination as a stand-alone concern. Let's shout out together. I repeat again, let's shout out together, menstrual discrimination is not a harmful practice. Menstrual discrimination is not a harmful traditional practice. I believe that menstrual discrimination is itself a form of sexual and gender-based violence. Unfortunately, the UN and its key partners are misinterpreting menstrual discrimination and are misleading the discourse. For instance, which form of menstrual discrimination is in favor of person's will? Dear friends, do you agree with the UN's interpretation? I do not for the following reasons. 1. Any and all forms of menstrual discrimination are against a person's will. Second, one of these restrictions or practices overlap at least 2 categories of sexual and gender-based violence. For example, a menstruating person is not allowed to touch the water in a community source. Here at once, all category of sexual and gender-based violence like sexual or emotional or physical or deprivation from services and resources are included. Can you calculate how many forms of menstrual discrimination practices and menstruator experiences during the whole lifespan, including menopause? Regrettably, the UN doesn't acknowledge the diverse form of sexual and gender-based violence that are caused by menstrual discriminatory practices. When publishing data on sexual and gender-based violence, how can the data presented by UN be valid or authoritative if 1 woman out of 3 experience sexual or emotional or physical violence in our lifetime? Again, I urge the UN to acknowledge the menstrual discrimination is a form of sexual and gender-based violence. It's a high time to reconsider it. Additionally, menstrual discrimination itself is a violation of human rights. If you use the same menstrual practice here, the fact that it is prohibited to touch the water source, how many rights have been violated? How many times has this right been violated in one menstrual cycle and its impact on non-menstruating days? Here, the right to dignity, freedom, equality, right to mobility or participation, right to health, right to water, right to environment, right to education are violated at once and may occur many times in a day. The UN has been advocating human rights for last 76 years and yet have never seen the violence of bunch of human rights at once. UN has not seen all the pain, suffering and struggle of menstruators during menstruation and its impact in non-menstruating days and throughout the lifespan of an individual, including menopause. Let's have a conversation about why the UN disregards the concerns of menstruators, my friends. I often think our seniors social scientists have done a lot for us. No doubt, they built our foundation, what we have been sharing now. However, I believe they may have overlooked menstruation from the human right perspectives. Do you think the uterus of childbirth is enough to unpack the unequal power relationship and patriarchy? Before enough to carry baby, wasn't there a role of uterus for construction and reinforcement of power and patriarchy? It sounded like an odd question, though it is the truth indeed. Menstruation is not a natural phenomenon only, it's a social as well. It impacts in every moment and aspect of life, no matter whether you born with the uterus and ovaries or no matter whether it is about sex-selective abortion or child marriage or gender pay gap or not allowing to touch water source or climate crisis or sexual and reproductive health or so on. Therefore, UN and colleagues misinterpret and mislead the menstrual movement. menstruation be should examine as a life cycle approach and even after the death in few cultures. And most importantly, it is not a linear and it is beyond the menstrual product or infrastructure or management or even health. It has to examine in holistic and life cycle approach. Dear friends, let's appeal to UN and its friends to change its lens to define and address menstrual discrimination now. Dear friends, I'm afraid that you may leave the conference or stop listening my speech because I'm challenging the prestigious and esteemed organization, the UN. Sorry for being bold, but it is very important to question for deconstruction the menstrual and feminist movement. Let me share another area of UN misinterpreted and misleading. The number of organizations which are working around sexual rights and reproductive rights and recently in comprehensive sexual education is really very high. They spend abundance of wealth and time, but again they don't consider that the menstruation is an entry for entire sexual and reproductive rights including comprehensive sexual education. If a menstruator doesn't understand her menstruation, how can she make decision while having unsafe sex, or she can receive assistance for emergency contraceptive or safe abortion services? She would trapped with other forms of sexual and gender-based violence. If you are really committed for sexual and reproductive rights or comprehensive sexual education, you need to change your lens now that the menstrual dignity is an entry to sexual and reproductive rights in all diversities. Dear friends, I strongly believe that you are agreeing with me. I wonder even if you agree with me in the name of the menstruation, if you only work on menstrual hygiene or management or health or period poverty, you are not fully aligned with menstrual dignity, nor are you aligned with Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. I gently remind you again that menstrual practice is not only a discriminatory but also complex and multifaceted. Therefore, you are missing the effect of menstrual practices on the various aspects of menstruator's life systemically and symptomatically. You need to put menstrual dignity or dignified menstruation at the center of your thinking. If you did so, we could develop a series of indicators to describe menstrual health, management, education, product or wash facilities and so on. For instance, Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation proposed 3P approach for making menstrual product dignified and 4S approach for making wash facilities dignified menstruation. Likewise, the indicators developed for making our home, school and workplace dignified menstruation friendly. Let's work together and create the just and dignified planet for our daughters, granddaughters and everyone. Dear friends, each moment of our life is a moment of dignified menstruation moment. No matter who we are, to celebrate this notion with visible programs may not practical for many of us. Therefore, since 2019, Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation initiated an International Day for Dignified Menstruation on 8th December. I gently remind you all to book December 8th as a Dignified Menstruation Day in your calendar. But that is not enough. Let's capitalize on all local, national, international moments and days for advocating dignified menstruation. If you are following Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation via social networks, Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation is super active to mark Menstrual Month under the theme or its mantra, Menstrual Talk, Dignity First. As a feminist, we need to unpack many things within us. Therefore, Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation called Menstrual Health Day for 28 May because our menstrual blood is clean, pure and there is no need to sanitize. Dear friends, I am pretty sure that you are aware about the activities of Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. But if you don't, let me highlight very briefly who we are. It is not formed by any UN or INGO's consortium with a bunch of funds and team members. It is formed by a group of people and organizations that wanted to be heard. No one listened to our stories, no one acknowledged our pain and suffering around, not just because of discriminatory menstrual practice but also because of consequences of it. We started with 0 penny. We received threatening emails from big organizations and networks from Global North. I vividly remember their lines in emails, WhatsApp groups, and Facebook that Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation created confusion to media and government. We were and are not provided platforms for speak, our voices blocked out, our comments discounted in Zoom chats. Even the friends from Global South do not listen us because they colonize emotionally. It was tough, more than tough. Meanwhile, my tiny team members at Secretariat Office and finger counting friends from all around the globe helped make Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation come alive and support us on the way to disrupt everyone, especially the UN, who is misleading governments, INGOs, the media, and the public. Along with such challenges, Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation has been organizing regular webinars, online, offline research in collaboration with universities, organizations, volunteers, online, offline fellowship programs, online, offline trainings. We developed training manual. We published fiction and non-fiction books for development practitioners, ramps for young children. We also contributed chapters in 9 international books. In short, Global South Coalition is working hard to change the narrative around menstruation from hygiene to dignity and from 5 days bleeding to life cycle approach. Friends, join us. Please get a membership which will take you less than a minute and is free of cost. You will get resource materials, information, opportunities and technical support to develop proposals and so on. Last but not least, I appeal to join the dignified menstruation movement and reclaiming our rights which we all deserved. I wish a very successful conference with the note of Menstrual Talk Dignity First. Gracias. Thank you.